I woke up to the kind of silence that screams. No morning cartoons, no coffee brewing, no sound of small feet pattering across the hardwood floor. Just stillness, thick and foreign. I reached for my phone and saw a single bank notification. 3:04 a.m. Withdrawal, 178,230 $230. I blinked. My heart stalled. I rushed to the kids' room, empty. Laura's closet, half open, her wedding ring, gone, no note, no goodbye. By 6:15 a.m., I knew I wasn't just alone, I was erased. For 25 years, I built our life like an architect of stability. I climbed every corporate rung, hit every financial milestone, and made sure they had everything but me. The company dinners, the late flights, the missed birthdays, piano recitals, soccer games. I told myself I was doing it for them. I believed that until the moment I found out they were gone, and not a single photograph in the hallway had me in it. I stood in the middle of our kitchen, surrounded by appliances I paid for, in a house I bought. And I couldn't remember the last time Laura smiled at me without strain, or when Ethan hugged me without flinching, or when Mia called me Daddy instead of Sir. They didn't run away in the night. They slowly backed out of my life, and I never noticed. But this isn't the end of my story. It's the brutal beginning of everything I'm about to fight for. The sunlight pushed through the blinds far too aggressively for a Thursday morning. Richard blinked awake, momentarily disoriented. His head pounded, not from alcohol, but from the 2-hour conference call he'd fallen asleep reviewing at midnight. The smell of coffee usually served as his alarm, but today there was nothing. No hum of activity downstairs, no cereal bowls clinking, no whispered arguments between his kids about who got the last toaster waffle. He sat up, rubbed his eyes, and checked the time. 7:12 a.m., late. Laura usually left for the bakery by 6:30, but Mia and Ethan should have still been home. He grabbed his phone to text her, but his thumb froze. A notification from the bank glowed at the top of his screen. Withdrawal complete. $178,230. 3:04 a.m. He tapped it, heart racing. Another transaction followed. 0.0 remaining in joint account. His blood went cold. Downstairs, the air felt wrong. Their coats were gone. Mia's backpack missing from the hook by the door. Ethan's cleats no longer sat under the stairs. The fridge was oddly bare. Laura's engagement ring was missing from the small glass tray she always left it in beside the sink. Richard called her, straight to voicemail. He tried Ethan, then Mia's emergency phone. No answers, no messages, no notes. It felt like a robbery. But there was no broken glass, no forced doors, just absence, methodical, deliberate, intimate. Richard's first emotion wasn't fear. It was anger. She planned this. She did this on purpose. How long had she been plotting it? Days? Weeks? She'd emptied their entire savings. She'd taken the kids. She hadn't even left a damn post-it note. Laura, the woman who used to cry watching shampoo commercials, had orchestrated an escape with the precision of a heist crew. He paced the kitchen, jaw clenched. After everything he'd provided, after all the long nights, promotions, sacrifices, he had given them everything. A 5-bedroom house in a safe neighborhood, private schools, family vacations. Though yes, sometimes he had to fly back early or take a few calls from the beach. He made all of it possible. And this was the thanks he got? He sat at the kitchen island, his eyes landing on the untouched fruit bowl. Perfect bananas, slowly browning, just like everything else. Perfect on the surface, rotting quietly beneath. He opened the security app. Laura had disabled the cameras, of course. He ran upstairs to his office, yanked open drawers, rummaging for anything. Letters, receipts, a clue. His hands trembled. That's when he spotted a small flash drive taped beneath the drawer. He pulled it off, heart hammering, and plugged it into his laptop. One file. A voice memo, time-stamped the night before. It was Mia's voice. "Hi, Daddy. Mommy said you might listen to this if you're really, really scared or mad. I don't want you to be mad at her, okay? She's not being mean. She's doing something brave. Mommy says sometimes love means doing hard things. And this is really, really hard. We're safe. I promise. But Mommy said she'll tell you more when it's time. Please don't be mad. I love you, Daddy." Richard didn't move. His hand hovered over the trackpad. The voice echoed in the silence of the house. He played it again. "I love you, Daddy." The fury drained from his chest like water down a sink. In its place came something colder. Shame. Fear. He tried to think. Tried to make sense of it. Why would Laura do this? What was she protecting them from? Him? No, that was ridiculous, wasn't it? He leaned back in his chair, the leather pressing against his spine like judgment. His mind flitted back to a moment from 7 years ago. Laura holding Ethan's hand, asking if Richard could come to just one parent-teacher night. "It's just an hour," she'd said. He told her he had a board meeting. She nodded then. She always nodded, but her eyes had looked like glass ready to crack. More memories came, uninvited. A birthday missed. A soccer final he arrived late to. Ethan already back in the car, silent. Laura packing the picnic alone while Mia tried not to cry over a spilled juice box. The gifts, the money, the trips. Had those ever really made up for not being there? He'd told himself for years that he was building a future, that all the sacrifices would make sense eventually, that one day they'd understand, that someday they'd thank him. But someday never came. And now they were gone. Richard pressed play again, listening to Mia's message on loop. Each word chipped away at the man he thought he was. The kind of man whose daughter had to record a message to explain why her mother vanished. They weren't running away from danger. They were running from him. The first thing Richard did was call the bakery. The line rang twice before disconnecting. He tried again. Same result. He checked their website. Permanently closed. It read in red block letters. No social media updates. No farewell post. No explanation. He got in his car, drove downtown, and stared at the empty storefront where Laura's life had once lived. The windows were bare. The chalkboard sign was gone. Inside, through the dusty glass, he could still see the faint outline of flour on the counter. A customer's forgotten umbrella still hung by the coat rack. It looked as if the world had stopped mid-sentence and just left. He walked around the block, peered into the alley where the delivery van used to park. Gone. Later that night, he searched the DMV website using her license plate number. The title transfer had happened quietly, 2 weeks ago. She'd planned this. He sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. If this were an affair, there would be signs. Calls, strange names, unexplained absences. But there was nothing. No scent of someone else's cologne. No unfamiliar number on the phone bill. Nothing out of place, except everything. He went home and pulled out Laura's file folder. Tax records, legal documents, anything that might explain what she was thinking. He stared at their last joint tax return. Married filing jointly. A box checked with finality. A lie in retrospect. He logged into their shared cloud account. Most of Laura's recent files were baking spreadsheets and receipts, but tucked in an old folder marked Mia's Science Fair, he found a password-protected Word document. He tried Mia's birthday. It opened. Inside, a scanned letter addressed to no one, dated 6 months prior. Short, cryptic. If you're reading this, it means things didn't get better. It means I couldn't wait any longer. I'm sorry. This isn't revenge. This is defense. Beneath that, only one line stood out. Bolded. He doesn't hit us, but he erases us. Richard's throat tightened. He pushed back from the desk and stood up too fast. The room spun. He didn't hit them. Of course not. He'd never even raised his voice. Well, hardly ever. But he was strict. Focused. He ran their house like he ran boardrooms, efficiently. And yes, maybe sometimes Laura looked tired of explaining to the kids why Daddy wasn't coming. Maybe sometimes she went to bed without waiting up. But that was marriage, wasn't it? That night, as he sat in the dim glow of his study, an email pinged into his inbox. No subject, no name. He clicked. If you really love your children, let them go. She's protecting them. From you. Don't follow. Don't look. Don't force them back into a house that never felt like home. The sender's address was a string of random characters. He hit reply, typed, "Who are you?" and pressed send. It bounced back immediately. Untraceable. He closed the laptop slowly, as if handling something fragile. The last words from the email looped in his mind like a whisper. From you. He poured himself a glass of water, left it untouched on the counter, then wandered upstairs. He opened the door to the guest room, where Laura used to hide during migraines or fights. It smelled faintly of lavender and old books. He found her old MacBook in the closet. Dead. He charged it, logged in using the password she always used, Blueberry83. A few folders, a few documents, and one app icon flashing in the dock. A journaling app. He clicked. Her entries stretched back years. He skimmed until one entry stopped him cold. It was dated November 9th, 2 years ago, the night he landed a big promotion. He stood in the kitchen today like a king returning from war. New title, bigger office. I smiled. I hugged him. And inside, I crumbled. He didn't notice Ethan left the dinner table early. Didn't see Mia cry when he brushed past her drawing. I feel like I'm living with a man whose body is here but whose soul checks into the office every morning. Entry after entry painted the same picture. Laura fading, trying, failing, wanting connection, asking for time, hoping for notice. One entry stung the most. I asked him if he'd do couples therapy. He said, "I don't have time for that crap." I didn't ask again. Richard closed the laptop. His hands trembled. What else had he dismissed? What else had she quietly buried because he made it seem too inconvenient to unearth? He walked into the master bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. Laura's pillow still had a faint dent. He picked it up, hugged it to his chest, and let out a breath that felt like it had been held for years. She had tried, and he had been too busy being right, being successful, being essential to everything except the people who mattered. Maybe this wasn't abandonment. Maybe it was the first time Laura chose to stop erasing herself, and maybe, just maybe, she was right to do it. The envelope came in the mail 5 days after the email. No return address, no name. Just his name, written in a delicate, slightly slanted script. Richard Moore. The handwriting felt familiar, like something from a holiday card long buried in the back of a drawer. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, torn from a notebook. The message was short, careful. I was silent when it happened to me. I told my daughter never to be. She's not trying to punish you, Richard. She's protecting herself. And your children. I loved my husband too once. until I realized love doesn't mean letting yourself disappear. It was signed. Margaret, Laura's mother. Richard stood motionless for several minutes, the letter resting in his palm like a verdict. He remembered Margaret as a quiet woman, always smiling with her lips, but never with her eyes. She never stayed long when she visited, and Laura never spoke of her father. Not really. Just vague references. He was complicated, she once said. He had expectations. That night, Richard went into the attic, digging through boxes until he found the one labeled Dad's office. It had been sealed since his funeral 7 years ago. The tape crinkled as he peeled it away. Inside, awards, newspaper clippings, journals. The man had been a legend in their town, the kind of father other men measured themselves against. Richard opened a leather-bound notebook, expecting budgeting notes or family mottos. Instead, he found lists. Strict, color-coded charts. Daily schedule: Richard, age 13. Wake at 5:30, run 2 miles, eat protein, no sugar. Piano 6:45, read 7:30. Goals, targets, notes on performance. 1 entry, missed run today, excuse a tired, must correct attitude. Richard closed the book slowly, something tightening in his chest. His father hadn't raised him. He'd trained him. Memories started to click together like puzzle pieces. His mother's quiet crying behind a closed bathroom door, her always present glass of wine at dinner. The way she flinched whenever voices rose above a certain pitch. She wasn't fragile. She was surviving. He'd always thought his father was hard because the world required it. Now, he realized, the world had never asked for that kind of man. His father had simply forced himself onto everyone else and called it success. And now, Richard saw himself in that same mirror. He hadn't yelled, he hadn't hit, but he had expected, demanded, structured everything and everyone around his own orbit. He was still staring into the box when his phone buzzed, a text from a number he didn't recognize. "Ethan's staying with me for a while. Thought you should know. Darren." Darren was Ethan's closest friend since middle school. Richard called the number. It rang 3 times. "Yeah?" came a cautious voice. "Darren, it's Richard. I just got your text. Is Ethan okay?" There was a pause. Then, "He's okay, but not great. He's been kinda quiet. I didn't want him alone. Can I talk to him?" "Hang on." Richard waited, heart pounding, the sound of shuffling, then silence, and then Ethan's voice, low, unsure. "Hi. Ethan, I didn't know where you were. I've been trying to reach you." "I know." A long pause. "Can we talk? In person?" Richard asked, voice cracking. "I don't know, Dad." Richard swallowed hard. "Please, I just want to understand." Another pause. Then, "Okay, tomorrow. Darren's house. Don't bring anyone." The next day, Richard arrived with hands empty and heart heavier than it had ever been. Ethan met him in the front yard, arms crossed, shoulders rigid. They sat on the porch. For several minutes, neither spoke. Then Ethan said, "I wrote a letter last year. You never saw it." Richard looked up. "What kind of letter?" "I was going to... I didn't. But I was thinking about it, about ending everything." Richard stopped breathing. "I didn't think anyone would notice." "Not really. Not even you. You were always working, always distracted. I felt like a background character in your life." Richard couldn't speak. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. "I told Mom. She cried for hours, took me to therapy. You didn't even know or ask. You just thought I was moody or lazy. But I was drowning." A tear slid down Richard's cheek. He didn't wipe it. I thought you'd be proud of me if I worked harder. Got straight A's, played soccer, did everything you never had time to watch." "I'm proud of you," Richard whispered. "But I never knew that. Because you never said it." Ethan turned his head, jaw tight. "I'm sorry," Richard said. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I didn't see you." Ethan's shoulders dropped, just slightly. "I don't hate you, Dad," he said. "But I don't trust you. Not yet." "I'll earn it," Richard said. "Even if it takes the rest of my life." They sat together in silence, broken and raw, but no longer invisible. And for the first time in years, Ethan didn't get up to walk away. Richard walked into his office on a Monday morning and typed a resignation letter with fingers that barely shook. There was no dramatic confrontation, no shouting match with the CEO, no corporate scandal. Just a short, brutally honest note that ended with, "I need to rebuild something that isn't on a balance sheet." He left the letter on his assistant's desk, turned off his phone, and walked out without saying goodbye. He disconnected every tether, deleted calendar reminders, logged out of every work account, canceled every future engagement. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful, it was unnerving. The house, once filled with noise he'd learned to tune out, was now filled with echoes. The tick of the thermostat, the hum of the fridge, the creak of floors he'd walked across 1,000 times without ever really noticing. He sat in the living room that first night, staring at family photos like they belonged to someone else's life. There were smiles in those frames, but now he saw the spaces between them. Ethan's eyes looking elsewhere. Laura's hand curled tightly around Mia, not him, and him, always posed, always slightly distant, like a guest in his own home. He began writing letters, handwritten, messy, vulnerable. One to Mia, telling her about the day she was born and how scared he was to hold something so small. One to Ethan, confessing the pride he never voiced. One to Laura, not asking her to come back, but thanking her for leaving before it was too late. He signed them all. "Love, Dad." Twice a week he showed up to therapy. At first he spoke in half sentences. "I don't know. I guess. Maybe." But slowly the words came. Regret, shame, confusion, grief. He learned that silence wasn't absence. It was avoidance. That control wasn't love. It was fear. That success meant nothing if it left everyone else behind. At the therapist's suggestion, he shared his story on a podcast for men navigating fatherhood. The host asked him, "What would you tell your younger self?" Richard took a long breath. "I'd say, look up before it's too late. Look at your wife, your kids. They don't want your money. They want you." He didn't expect much response. But 3 days later, his inbox overflowed. Dozens of messages, some angry, some grateful, and one that stopped him cold. "I'm not a father. I'm the son of one. A man like you, who worked, who built, who ignored. He died before I could ever tell him how much it hurt. Please don't die before your kids know you changed." He read it again, and again. And then he cried, not just for his own failures, but for every silence passed down from father to son like a curse. A week later, a legal notice arrived. Laura had agreed to a supervised video call, mediated by her attorney. 1 hour, no legal discussions, just conversation. Richard wore a collared shirt and sat in front of his computer like he was preparing for the most important interview of his life. When the screen blinked to life, his breath caught. Laura sat with her back straight, her expression guarded but not cruel. Her lawyer beside her. Ethan stood behind her, half hidden in shadow. Mia leaned against a cushion, holding a stuffed animal he didn't recognize. "Hi," Richard said, his voice barely a whisper. Mia waved shyly. Ethan didn't move. Laura nodded. "Hi, Richard. I won't waste your time," he said. "I just wanted to say thank you for taking care of them, for doing what I couldn't." Laura's face didn't change, but her eyes flickered, something between surprise and pain. "I'm not here to win you back," he added. "I'm here to become someone worth knowing." The silence that followed was thick, but not hostile. Mia leaned forward and typed something into the chat box. "Do you still want to be my dad?" Richard stared at the words. His throat tightened. He typed back, "Every single day." Mia smiled. It was small, brief, but it was real. When the call ended, he sat in the quiet again. But this time it didn't feel like punishment. It felt like preparation. He looked around the empty house, and for the first time, it felt like a place he could rebuild. Not alone, but with intention. The door wasn't open, but it wasn't locked either. They met again 2 weeks later in a modest office with beige walls and overused tissue boxes. A family therapist named Leanne sat between them, composed and gentle. Laura kept her coat on the entire session, arms crossed, jaw tight. Richard tried not to look at her too much. He didn't want to interpret every breath she took as hope or rejection. It wasn't a warm reunion. It wasn't supposed to be. Leanne opened with a question. "What do you both want out of being here?" Laura answered without pause. "Clarity." Richard hesitated. A chance. To understand. To not repeat everything I didn't know I was doing. The session moved slow, like walking on a frozen lake with every step threatening to crack beneath them. They talked about Mia's nightmares, about Ethan's anxiety, about the weight Laura carried alone for too long. Then Laura's voice trembled. "I wasn't going to leave. I wasn't. Not at first." Richard looked up. "I gave you so many signs," she said, blinking fast. "The little ones, big ones. I begged you to come to therapy, to come to Ethan's games, to notice me. Just once." "I see that now," he said softly. She shook her head. "No, you don't. You said once, after a fight. If you can't handle this life, maybe you should go." Her voice cracked. "And I did. Because I believed you meant it." Richard closed his eyes. He remembered the fight. Vaguely, deadlines looming, stockholders breathing down his neck, Laura crying about something. He couldn't even remember what. He hadn't meant it. He was angry. But it didn't matter. "I'm sorry," he said, "for not hearing you, for not stopping you, for making you feel like leaving was your only choice." Laura looked away, tears streaking her cheeks. "I'm not promising I'll be perfect," he added, "but I'm here, and I'm learning. Slowly. I want the chance to be the husband and father I should have been." Leanne gave them space. She didn't force conclusions. She let the silence do the talking. Over the next several weeks, they continued. One session turned into 4, then 8. Some days, Laura didn't say much. Others, she asked hard questions. Why didn't you notice Ethan was depressed? Why did you always put work above everything? Richard answered honestly, even when it made him feel like crawling out of his skin. Mia began attending the kids' sessions, drawing pictures of before and after. Before, Daddy with a phone. After, Daddy holding her hand. Ethan remained quiet, but present. One evening, after a particularly hard group session, he stayed back while Laura took Mia to the car. He sat across from Richard, fingers fiddling with the hem of his hoodie. "You know that lawyer you hired last year?" he asked. Richard blinked. What? Ethan didn't look up. You told Mom during a fight that if things kept going bad, you'd get full custody. That you knew someone who could make it happen. Richard froze. The words flooded back. A night full of tension, after Laura threatened separation. He'd called a friend, a lawyer, out of fear. He never pursued anything, but he remembered saying those exact words in anger. Not to Laura, not to Ethan, but Ethan had heard. She didn't take the money to run away, Ethan said quietly. She took it because she thought you'd use it against her. Richard swallowed. I didn't mean it. I was scared. But you said it. He nodded. I did. That night, Richard cried in his car for 20 minutes before driving home. The next morning, he wrote another letter. This one for himself. A list titled, Things I Will No Longer Ignore. It included my son's silence, my daughter's drawings, my wife's exhaustion, my own fear. He folded it and taped it to the bathroom mirror. The next session, Richard brought up the custody threat before anyone else did. He looked Laura in the eyes and said, You were right to be scared. I gave you every reason to protect them from me, and I'm so sorry you had to. Laura's eyes softened. Not forgiveness? Not yet. But something shifted. As they walked out together that day, Mia reached for Richard's hand without being told, and Ethan, without turning around, said, I think I want to talk next time. Richard nodded, though no one saw it. And for the first time, silence didn't feel like distance. It felt like possibility. 1 year later, Richard no longer wore tailored suits. His watch didn't buzz with calendar alerts, and the corner office that once validated his existence now felt like a distant lifetime. He rented a modest home near the community college, where he taught evening finance classes. During the day, he volunteered at a youth mentorship program, helping kids, most of them boys, learn how to navigate life with more than just ambition. His mornings were quiet, but never lonely. He cooked breakfast with 2 hands instead of 1 on the phone. He walked to work. He learned to ask people how they were, and waited long enough to hear the real answer. He didn't check his net worth anymore. He checked in with himself. Ethan visited often, not out of obligation, but with intention. They sat on the back porch, talked about music, school, the books they were both pretending to read. One day, as they sipped hot chocolate from mismatched mugs, Ethan said, I switched majors. Richard raised an eyebrow. Oh yeah? To psychology. I want to help people like you. Like, people who want to be better but don't know how. Richard didn't respond right away. His throat felt tight. I'm proud of you, he said finally. Ethan looked up, then smiled. I know. That night, Richard wrote those words in his journal. I'm proud of you. I know. He never wanted Ethan to forget them again. Mia spent most weekends with him now. She'd made a comic book, hand-drawn, stapled, the cover colored with crayons. She titled it, The Lost Dad Who Found His Way Home. Richard turned the pages slowly. In it, the dad was a bear with a briefcase. He got lost in a dark forest, chasing glowing dollar signs. But then he met a tiny fox and a wise owl who helped him remember his real path. At the end, the bear wasn't rich, but he was home with his family under a tree full of laughter. He framed the comic. It hung above his desk. Laura, too, had changed. She still baked, now from a shared kitchen she rented by the hour. But she smiled more often. They hadn't reconciled romantically, and maybe they never would. But there was peace, respect, even warmth. They co-parented with an ease neither of them expected. On the anniversary of the day she left, Laura surprised him by inviting him to dinner. Not a legal agreement, not a session, just dinner. At her place, with the kids. He brought flowers. Mia rolled her eyes. Ethan smirked. The table was simple: pasta, garlic bread, store-bought cake, but the air felt light, familiar. As they finished eating, Laura stood up, glass in hand. "I wanted to do this," she said, "because today marks 1 year, not of leaving, but of rebuilding." They all raised their glasses, even Richard. Later that night, after dishes were done and laughter had spilled freely from all corners of the house, Richard sat at the kitchen island with his laptop. He wrote one last email to the podcast host who'd invited him on a year ago. Subject: Update. If you're wondering what happened to the man who let his family slip through his fingers, he's doing okay. He's not perfect, but he's present, and he's learning that presence is everything. 1 year ago, I thought I'd lost everything. Turns out I'd just been blind to what mattered most. If someone like me, who broke everything, can help rebuild it, maybe there's hope for anyone. He hit send. Down the hall, Ethan and Mia were laughing at something on the TV. Laura was packing leftovers into containers. Richard leaned back in his chair. The house wasn't the same. It was better. Not because it was flawless, but because everyone inside had chosen to stay, not out of habit or guilt, but out of love. And this time, there was no pretending. Just a father, a mother, 2 children, a meal, a moment. Real.